Finding your way through the maze of merchant processing can be a challenge. Are you confused about what you're being charged? After watching this short video, you should be able to tell what type of fee structure you are being billed for, and more importantly, know if you're getting the best rate without relying on what a salesperson is telling you. Let's start with understanding the process of accepting credit cards. It starts with a consumer presenting their credit card to the merchant. The merchant swipes their credit card and it is directed to the processor, which then seeks authorization through the card type network. Interchange directs the inquiry to the correct card issuing bank of the consumer. The bank then verifies the funds are available and returns a response of approved or declined. This authorization is then routed back through the supported card network and is received by the processor, which provides the merchant the authorization. At the end of each day, a merchant will batch all of their credit card transactions and this will be sent to the processor. This processed amount is then deposited directly to the merchant's bank account. Now that you've seen the process, let's look at where the fees and charges are actually going. Merchants' fees will fall into three areas: interchange, dues and assessments, and processing costs. Let's look at how fees are determined. The fees that are charged from interchange depends on two things. First, the type of card the consumer is using. Interchange is comprised of hundreds of different rate categories, depending on the card type, and secondly, the fee is affected by the requirements to qualify for a specific rate. For example, a card present would have a lower fee versus a card that was keyed in. Visa and MasterCard publish these rates and requirements semi-annually. It is important to understand the fee amount is set by the sponsoring bank of the credit card and is the same for everyone, from Walmart right down to the smallest corner shop. The interchange fees are updated every 6 months, and any adjustments or increases only affect one or two interchange rate categories. Additionally, there are dues and assessment fees. These are passed on to the merchant. These are membership fees paid by financial institutions to Visa and MasterCard. These fees have no rules, categories, or criteria. They are just a set percentage of the amount of the sale and are the same for every transaction processed. Now let's look again at these three areas. Even though it is a bit confusing to understand which cards are being charged what amounts, the most important thing to know is that the interchange fees and the dues and assessment costs are absolutely set, and no one is paying more or less. It is impossible to be given a discount or even be overcharged for any of these fees. And anyone that tells you different is incorrect or misleading you. All you need to be concerned about is this third area, processing costs. And if you understand how and what you're being charged for processing, then you'll be able to accurately determine what you are paying and, more importantly, know if you're getting the best rate. So let's break down this third area of processing costs. There basically is only two types of fee structures in the industry: tiered pricing or Interchange Plus. Tiered pricing is often referred to as bucket pricing. This is the most commonly used pricing structure in the industry. Interchange Plus pricing is often referred to as cost plus, true pricing, or pass-through pricing. Historically speaking, Interchange Plus pricing is reserved only for very large companies like national retailers, and they have been the only ones able to benefit from Interchange Plus pricing. Don't be misled by the assumption you can't get Interchange Plus pricing model. So let's break down the differences between the two pricing models. First, let's look at tiered pricing. So most processors use the tiered pricing model. In this pricing structure, processors are using 100 plus different interchange categories and separating them into buckets. They typically refer to these buckets as qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified. Under bucket pricing, each bucket is priced high enough to cover the rate of the card with the highest interchange fee in that bucket. With this type of pricing, the merchant is paying the higher price for all of the cards in that bucket. Additionally, when Visa and MasterCard make changes to interchange rates, it is common for processors to use this as an excuse to raise the rate of the entire bucket, even though it only affects one or two of the cards. Merchant account processors use their own discretion to determine what categories of interchange each card will be separated into the tiered pricing model. The criteria for which each processor uses to determine this differs greatly between each of them. This makes it almost impossible to accurately compare processors in a tiered pricing structure. A transaction that would fall into a qualified bucket with processor A may fall into a mid-qualified bucket for processor B, and that exact same card and transaction could fall into a non-qualified bucket for processor C account. Look at this Google page when we type in merchant processing rate. These are what we call marketing or teaser rates. These rates would apply to a check or debit card transaction where the consumer enters their PIN number. What they don't show us is the rate they charge for all the other credit cards and reward cards because that's where they hide all their profits. For example, let's use the lowest teaser we can find of 1.03%. And for mid-qualified transactions, a rate of 1.53 and 3.78 for non-qualified transactions for this example. For regular Visa and MasterCard transaction, let's use a rate of 1.54%, which is a common rate from the Visa wholesale rate sheet. Now, if you're wondering why the rate for the qualified and the mid-qualified is lower than the rate for the regular Visa MasterCard, that is because all of these are surcharges on top of the base rate of 1.54. In order to calculate this, all you need to do is add the 1.54 to the 103 or the 153 or the 3.78 to see what the actual rate is. So always remember, when a salesperson is quoting you rates, always ask them if this is on top of the regular Visa and MasterCard rate. This should give you a basic understanding of how tiered pricing works. Now, in comparison, let's look at how Interchange Plus is calculated. With true Interchange Plus pricing, the actual costs are passed through to the merchant, and all of the costs of the processing are disclosed for the merchant to see, including interchange and the dues and assessment costs. The processor then will work with the merchant to establish the discount rate, the percent that is charged over the interchange or pass-through. Now let's look at what the difference of Interchange Plus pricing is. None of the qualified rates will apply, and let's use the same interchange rate of 1.54 and a common debit card interchange rate of 0.95 for this example. Let's say you've been quoted 25 basis points, which is also sometimes referred to as a discount rate. When we add this to the interchange rates and do the math, you can see what the same card would cost on interchange. Let's look back to our previous math we did on the tiered pricing example. You can see why Fortune 500 companies and large retailers demand Interchange Plus pricing over the tiered pricing structure. The advantages of Interchange Plus pricing is you have a processing rate that is determined up front. If an interchange rate is adjusted up or down, it automatically takes effect and will only affect a rate on a few of the cards. With no hidden costs and a statement you can actually understand, you will be receiving the most competitive pricing available, and it will be easy for you to compare to other processors with no games. So now that you understand the difference between the commonly used bucket pricing and the highly sought after Interchange Plus pricing, you can look at your current statement, and if you see words like qualified, mid-qualified, or non-qualified in line items, then you know you're on tiered or bucket pricing. Be aware, some of these statements can be very confusing, and they do that on purpose. Many merchants have been told they are on interchange pricing when in fact they're not.